standards and all that, the people are not comfortable with this, so we're gonna stop. So we stopped the process at that point in time, and said, let's look at how can we, as a state with transit in the county, make this work better. Now this is a little bit bigger picture, again, hard to see, but what it illustrates is we started looking at collisions beyond where they were. So if I don't know if this will help. You can see this is where the solid waste facility is, and all those dots there, and that's where all the collisions were occurring. So that was the worst spot. The second worst spot was way down here, which we couldn't afford because it was outside the scope of our project, because we only had $3 million. But when people were really concerned about that, we said, let's just stop and see what happens. Let's do an alternatives analysis, and we'll forget about money for a minute. We're just going to go out there and see what we can do. And we had several workshops. We went through about 8 alternatives. Here they are. And I'll click through these very quickly. They kind of range from don't do anything, just do the realignment of Park Road as a transit that we're not proposed. Which I think this is the same thing but with turn lanes. So we had a turn lane on the main line of the highway, but it still had that perpendicular connection to Parker. Actually, the north is to the left in this previous slide. We looked at realigning Parker to the east and putting turn lanes at Morris Road and at 20, which, by the way, this is the alternative we actually went with. We looked at different kinds of realignment. This one wasn't a whole lot different than one, but it took the Morris Road connection out of the mix, which was where all the collisions were occurring. We looked at trying to find a different way to access the highway from the site. There's a couple different ideas here. These again came from workshops that we had with concerned stakeholders. There's another one. So there were several ones that were just kind of different ways of looking at the problem. And then we looked at roundabouts. We did two, a 3-leg and a 4-leg, which were quite a bit more money. And we typically like roundabouts because they usually are the safest solution to a problem. But because the problem wasn't so severe that it really dictated that, and it slowed all the traffic down, including mainline movements, which are probably 80% of the traffic, if not more, is just coming through. So you're pretty much slowing down 80% of the traffic for a few of the turning movements that you're trying to make safer, which turn lanes tend to take care of that problem. So we ultimately chose the project to essentially give turn lanes to the Morris turning movement, realign Parker Road to connect to Morris on the right side of the screen, and then finish, basically do the same thing we were going to do on the main line near the solid waste facility. So essentially we started with $1 million, we got $500,000 from the county plus the right-of-way donations. We got the $1.5 million grant, and then based on the alternative evaluation, we added the Parker Road realignment to our project, which originally was Island Transit project, and we transferred, or Island Transit transferred $500,000 to us for that project, and we got an additional $2.5 million, which came from essentially from our department through connection with the legislature. It's the kind of thing that doesn't usually happen, but because the outcry was so strong and the need was determined to connect the project or expand the project all the way down to Morris Road, we got that additional $2.5 million, and there was a little bit of change there to round out this $6 million. So it doubled in cost, basically because we ultimately connected the transit access to our project. So if we had done what originally was approved by transit, we probably would have saved, it would have cost about close to $2.5 million less, about $2 million less. So this project pretty much cost $2 more million. We're going to get a way safer project. There's no question. We put turn lanes on a road. It gives people the ability to make left turn in a refuge area, which otherwise wouldn't have happened. So this kind of just gives you a sense of the bigger picture on the timeline. So we're about a year late. We're looking to go to add in May if we get our last pieces of right-of-way, but our whole right-of-way acquisition process got delayed by at least a year because of the process that we went through, the alternative process. And then, of course, because we're in the Edie's Landing Culture and Historic Reserve, there's a lot of process, which costs a lot of time and money. I think in the end, though, I think it's a good result. I think it gives us the ability to have turn lanes at two of the highest turn movement locations in that corridor, that part of it. We get new shoulders, get straighter road in some places, some of the site distances get straightened out, so the trees are even moved. I think the most important thing from a transit board perspective is that if there wasn't a requirement for second access, none of this would happen. But because the FTA grant required it, and the county's ordinance, I think it's an ordinance that says there's a certain size, I mean, that's the part that we never get involved in, because we only get involved when there is another access to the highway. We don't require it. Matter of fact, typically, in development, we say, no, we only have one, only one. But because of the size of the development, the planning department, the county, and the FTA grant both require the second access, so that's what kind of spun this thing all together, go into one direction. So there's my presentation. Pretty quick and high clip. I'm going to do it again next week at the RTPO board. So if you want to come in, great question. So it's really kind of a fun project because I think it's going to improve safety a great deal. It's not the end of it. We still got to go all the way to Race Road. So we're looking for more money. So if you want to do a bake sale, we'll be there with some cupcakes and see if we can get this money.
And Race Road's about 8 million, is that right?
It's really hard to say. See, like, we thought this was going to be about $2 million project. It turned into 3, and then because it expanded, actually it's not really fair because originally the scope, the scope just said, do as much as you can between Race and Jacobs, and then we scoped in that section really just around the solid waste facility. But when we expanded the scope, so it's not really fair to say the project doubled the cost, it just expanded. So it took $6 million to do this little piece. This other piece is another 4 or 5 times bigger. I would bet it's going to be a lot more than this building at the time. Although there isn't a transit facility. But that doesn't always mean that you don't get into these issues because, when you're there, and this is the chance you get, if it's your neighborhood, if it's your road you drive on, you want to make the safest possible can. So that's typically what happens. We have to really need to listen and hear what's out there and those budgets. But they're expand the project.
Just a quick question. Where is Race Road? Race Road doesn't show on any of the...
No, it doesn't. It's further to the south.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite a bit. It's actually where 20 and 525
Right. So there's some expansion of shoulders all the way down? Or?
There, we would like to. Typically, if you notice, the curves are all expanded because when those curves were built, we built those, I think, in the early 90s to take out the T intersections,
right.
Of course, and build those to standard. But everything else is old, really old design.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr.
Just real quick, Todd, for the benefit of the board, could you explain the triangle acquisition by Iowa Transit, how that all came to fruition, and the proposed park and ride location for the trailhead?
Yeah. Well, again, this wasn't our purchase, but I was working with Mark Rose when there was this issue of the second access became real. And we started talking about this. Actually, this was even before the transit facility got funded. The idea was we should have a second access. Wouldn't it be nice to clean up those strange, skewed connections to the highway? Because those are a source of collisions, and especially where Morris and Parker come together is really complicated. So one of the things that happened was the legislature earmarked funds to transit to purchase that property. To do exactly what ultimately was planned was to build the second access, which would be over Parker Road. And then along with that, there was going to be a transit park that's planned for bicycles and cars right along Old Smith Prairie Road. Now, there was about $896,000 that was earmarked for the actual realignment of Parker Road, which essentially transferred $500,000 to us, so we could build the Parker Road in a different alignment. So there was still some money left over to connect from the new Parker Road to the second access point. That's but that little piece is left, and the decision is that Ken has to make is what do you do? How, we build this little park and ride, bike and ride thing or not. So that's still kind of a decision that either it's an administrative decision or a board decision, I don't know, but that's what's left to be decided. And of course, that connection can't be made until we get finished with the realignment of the road. So the land is, that triangle land is owned by Highland Transit. The purpose was to realign Parker in it. Now that you're not going to do that anymore, that property isn't needed for that. And the question is whether or not you do anything more than just realign or rebuild Smithburg Road to connect to the new Parker Road. Just really getting out to paving, connecting the driveway. It's going to be a simple project. So I think that's kind of my history, my understanding of it. So actually, the purpose of needing that property is kind of gone. Because that was going to be a road connection. That was where the road was going to go. Now it's not needed. So the question is, what's the property? What's it needed for? That's got to be a decision that you will have. You need that property.
So I have several questions, but I sit on the RTPO board. So for the sake of time, I might save them, but just so you can be prepared, I'd like to know what thought was given to the property that's for sale to the southeast of, across the street from where you're looking at the realignment. I don't know how to describe it any better than that, but it's for sale and not as community controversial. And I'm going to have a question about lighting and how the intersections are being lighted because it's important that that area stays dark because of the OLF. I had a question about money for all the projects, and that's the race road piece. I'm going to want some more clarification on, I have been told repeatedly that this is a DOT project. From your presentation, it sounds like it was a county requested project, so I'm going to want that question clarified. And then, can't read my writing there. And then also, in terms of the, I actually want to ask this one here. In the $500,000 that was given for this project, that money has already been transferred over?
It's actually the city and the county.
Okay, great. Can that money come back?
Well, we wouldn't be able to do a project. We need the money.
Yeah. I'm not asking if you can do the project. I'm asking, can that money come back?
No, not unless you change the agreement.
So possibly.
Well, the agreement is, if you're going to add by October, then the agreement doesn't need to be modified. If we can't go to add by October, we have to revisit the agreement. But the agreement is to transfer $500,000 to the DOT as transit's part of the Parker Road realignment. But there is money left balance.
The second access.
Right, but the second access is in. So the $500,000 is for our portion of the exterior part. And I understand that, and I understand you said that it was earmarked for this. What I'm asking is, can that money come back if we don't do the project? And then my follow-on question will be, what else could it be eligible for as it relates to, and what else could it be eligible for?
What about don't do the project issue? That project, the project to realign Parker Road.
And you said we weren't using the whole $500,000, yeah, $500,000.
There was 800 and some $1,000 given, they used 500,000, they got 500,000, so there's $360,000 hanging out there somewhere.
Where's that and what can that be used for?
I don't think it's quite that much, but it's, that money was, so originally, there was $890-some thousand that was earmarked from the legislature to Highland Transit to build the Parker Road through here, through the little triangle.
Yeah.
To connect there and do the connection, basically paving this part, repaving it, connecting to there, and then building a bike and ride here. That was what the $896,000 was for. So when this plan got approved, we decided to do this. We asked Island Transit to contribute to that, since part of the $900,000 was for this. So that's $500,000 is for this project here. So there's a balance of 890 minus 500 is what you have to spend on whatever you want to spend it on. But this, of course, is a requirement to be able to pay that part.
So where is that $390,000?
It's sitting in your, I'm not sure if it's, you got it, I think it's still in one of the programs, it's upstate. That's like a grant. You haven't, I don't think you've used much of it. I think you might have used some of it for the design work for Parker Road. But, so there's probably, I don't know, 250,000 or something like that left. Which part of that would be used to pay for the paving of Olson and Prairie Road to connect with Morris, and then $500,000 of it would go to this project.
So while you're on that screen, see where you have that upper arrow where it says close the access at the intersections of SR 20 with Parker Road and Smith Perry. And it goes across a green field. I think that field is for sale.
This one right here?
Yeah, and so I guess my question is why couldn't you look at a realignment in that particular area that avoids going into the PRI properties?
Because that's a reasonable question. We would have to start our whole 106 4F, which is the historic and cultural resources project, over again. It would probably cost us another $700,000 in design because of the process it takes to go through there. The right of way we required some of this already. In other words, this project is about ready to go to advertisement, and if it's advertised in May, this will be all built by fall. If we stop now, we throw away close to over $1 million in work. That opportunity, from my perspective, had passed 2 years ago after we did the alternatives analysis. So that's the short answer. I mean, nothing's ever done until it's built, but it would be highly bad if we would stop right now. We could talk about it would be big time throwing the baby out with the bathwater since we went through this whole process. I don't think that property. Well, we never looked at doing anything with that application. I don't know that it came up in the process. We had lots of different ways of gaining access to the transit facility.
I'm going to step in on this right now. We've gone from a 10-minute presentation to a 25-minute presentation for a matter of to get through our agenda here. A lot of these questions can be revisited at the RTPO meeting on Friday, I think it is. It's next Wednesday, whatever the date is that we have on that. So if the board would consider that, I would appreciate it to move along to the next item, because we have a lot of items to cover here.
If I may, just real quick, if I could ask that Ken or assign to somebody, find out where that $250,000 is, what we can use it for, and what we cannot use it for. The other thing is, can we surplus that piece of triangle property? Because I don't think when we're looking at cutting service that we need a bike and ride. And what we could use that money for if it's sold.
Yes, good point. Ready to move on then, board? So we're going to workshop item number 3, the communication system. And I think, for the time that we have left, which is just barely a little over an hour, and we still have, 4, 5, including this, items to cover. Thank you, Mr. Carlson, by the way. Appreciate the presentation. We'll see you again.
We'll see you next week.
So for a quick update on our communication system, we've been working with the same communication system since 1997. Some of the challenges that we face, I hear from our operators every day. We have areas where it's hard to communicate. That's Camano and Whitby. We only have one repeater versus ICOM having 11. South Whitby has 6. Given the geography of Island County, there's several dead zones. And these dead zones are not only limited to the radio, but the cell phones also. There's places where you can't get cell phone reception also. The rebanding has caused delays. as well as there's been a freeze on issuing frequencies due to the rebanding, and working across international borders as well with Canada. And then obviously the costs associated with our radio repeater project. Something interesting to note, I've traveled for training different places and I've happened to have the radio with me. I've been in downtown Seattle and heard our communications crystal clear. I know a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to experience that, but what that tells me is that it's a area with our geography. And like I said, we've had the same system since '97. I think the expectations have grown with the radios because we know we're working on a process to move forward to get those, get that system updated.
Sean,
Yes,
I think there's a button you can press to make that full screen.
yes.
There we go.
Okay, so since, what we're doing now is, we've received some additional training just last week from ICOM with some new equipment to be able to test our radios and our antennas. We've integrated that new training into our preventive maintenance checks, which we do daily. We're checking for signal strength along with radio output and alignment, antenna alignment. And also, one of the things that we found in this process is with our vehicles being very old, there's also an element of corrosion as well. I mean, I don't know how many of you take your antenna from your car and take it off and look underneath it. I think we just assume we're in a bad spot or something, and that's another area of concern for us as well. So moving forward with this project, we're in partnership with ICOM. ICOM is the lead for obtaining and installing the radio repeaters that we've talked about, I know it seems like for years, for our enhanced communications. Where we are now is AdCom is searching for a frequency for Island Transit. We're given an estimated time of 3 months for the issuance of the new frequency and also the licensing. Once this happens, we can start to order the equipment for the enhancement. And this should take up to 6 to 8 weeks for the equipment to arrive. It'll take a few more weeks for the equipment to be staged, and installation should take approximately 2 weeks. Okay, so in the best case scenario, moving forward, if we have the frequency and licensing by August 1st, installation could begin sometime in mid-October. System could be turned on by mid-November. And again, it's important to note ICOM will be the lead on this. Island Transit, we are not the radio experts. We've been working with ICOM all along because they know radios. They do radios. They have been advising us on this project and working with us throughout. It's always been Island Transit's goal to help achieve interoperability throughout the region. And also, at the next board meeting, for those that have technical questions about the radio, we'll have ICOM's director will be here to speak. And they'll talk about those, answer those technical questions, and they'll also talk about the desired results that we're hoping to achieve.
And the delay in this project is caused by the freeze on issuing frequencies.
This is correct.
So even though we've allocated the money and made a commitment to do this, we have to wait until a frequency is available.
That is correct.
And the frequencies are issued by who?
So I'm assuming that's the FCC, but AdCom is the engineering firm that is, they go out, they find the frequencies, they also work through the red tape to get you licensed. There's no way you're gonna get it done quicker, so that's ICOM's recommendation.
So Island Transit's waiting on the FCC for frequency.
That's correct.
If I can add that, I spoke with ICOM just last week, And I've been in touch with them several times on this issue, and they've already gone ahead and they fronted the money to go ahead and instead of $10,000 for AdCom, it's gonna be $2,500. And they are just waiting on frequencies. And the ones that's in, they'll be able to fire off all the repeaters that ICOM is currently in progress of upgrading, because we just, county, or ICOM actually is investing a significant amount of money in updating all their, which is gonna make things better for our Raleigh County Public Works, for the Raleigh County Fire and Rescue and Police Departments, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with all our group.
Mr. Chairman, FYI, Sean and I will be meeting with Tom next week just to get a better idea of the overall system, more of the details involved in it, and for us to ensure that we're all working on the same page. But he's been very helpful and very cooperative. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments before we move on? Thank you very much. Item number 4 is the budget TDD narrative modifications. This is from our agenda item on March the 9th. And so who will do that presentation?
Mr. Chairman, this was an item that was brought before us, brought to the staff and board relative to the final approval of the budget document. There were some questions about the updating and some of the changes that the board wanted to take a look at relative to that, to some of the language and some of the issues involved in that narrative of the budget book. So I don't know exactly where or how the board wants to proceed with that. We were just awaiting any changes to make based on board input and board comment on that narrative section.
So this was something that I brought up.
Right.
And I'll just be upfront and say that I have not had any time to work on that, but I have some concerns about language that was in there as part of the narrative in terms of how conclusions were drawn and the justifications for some things, which I thought were somewhat faulty justifications or personalized justifications. And so my hope was that we could have just taken a work session and just go through it and make sure we're comfortable with the language. And so I feel a little responsibility to lead that process, but yeah, dropped the ball. I mean, I just haven't had time. And I apologize to the board.
And I might point out that, and I think you already know this, that document was a compilation of several years of back history and I think assumptions from the past and a lot of ideas that and perspectives that have changed over the years. So it definitely needs to be updated.
I would just add that perhaps making a checklist or a bullet list of page references and paragraphs that need attention. Because to do it as a committee of the whole without specific language recommendations would just take an awful lot of time. So, and I could also suggest that we don't have to fix the whole thing at once. We could aim for factual accuracy first, and then policy reflections as we clarify.
Since you and Jill are on the finance committee, would you consider that you meet with the director and the finance director and come up with those bullet points to identify the target areas just for time efficiency before it's brought to the board?
I'd be willing to help.
Yep.
Is that a reasonable solution?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then Can you make a commitment to a time in the month of April so that it's available for our May meeting?
Certainly. What do you think?
You might need to do it hours. I'm not trying to be difficult, I can't.
No, I understand.
So, but I could find time, it just may not be in traditional work hours,
Okay.
that's all I'm saying.
So we don't obviously need a motion for this. If this just becomes a commitment between the staff and the finance committee to work out that schedule between themselves and simplify the direction that you're going to take on
And we
this.
will accommodate whatever
Okay.
schedule the two board members want to.
So we have an agreement cast in stone.
Yeah, we'll help with it.
Okay, got that? Any further comments or questions on this agenda? Thank you, staff, and thank you. Workshop item number 5, board policies and procedures, code of conduct, ethics, agenda items from the March 9 meeting. I think that goes to the interim director.
I think with the appointment of the new board, I think there was some concern and interest in formalizing policies and procedures of the board as well as code of conduct, which is prevalent amongst most public agencies, and also an ethics policy. This item is up for board consideration. Another board item.
There's some state code that applies, I believe. So we're not, we've always, in a sense, had both the code of conduct and ethics mandated by the state RCW.
That's right, and there's sections for on both, to deal with both of those in the RCW.
It would be appropriate for you to bring forward a template.
I could do a couple of things. One, I could actually just print out and make available with the actual statute. Sometimes if it's not broke, don't fix it, you can take a look at it. There are, as the executive director stated, there are a lot of municipal entities also have standalone resolutions that include a code of conduct, ethical, those sorts of things. And a lot of times we'll pretty closely mirror the state statute, but sometimes we'll have other issues in there. And I can give you a couple samples of some of the clients I have.
Yeah, it would be helpful to start out with the template that's already.
And now what I'll do is I'll either give you the link or, depending on how voluminous printed it out, and I can just show you what the state statute is. I don't think the sections are either one of them are very big. So.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions on this item? Thank you. Well, that moves us on to item number 6. That's the status of the audit findings and resolutions. Agenda item number